Hello everyone. In this session, I'd like to show you how you can do delete and also reset changes on local changes made to the SAP UI5 application, and then you can submit the changes later. In the previous two sessions, we had a demo of the application itself, and we also looked at how you can do an insert and also an update of entries locally to the SAP UI5 applications, and later hit submit changes. So before we start with the delete operation, some theory behind how we can accomplish this. So we looked at updates in the previous session. So for deletes, the OData model has a remove method. But what this remove method does, it triggers a post request to the backend, and this is not something we want. We want to delete it within the SAP UI5 application, and then once everything looks hunky-dory, only then do we want to post to the backend. So this remove method is not going to work. Now we also looked at the binding object to do the create method, to call the create method, but there is no such delete method on this binding object, because this binding object, this is for the entire table, not at the row level. So this is the binding object for the entire table level. So this doesn't have a delete method because the action needs to be performed on a particular row. So both the OData model and the binding object, the methods in these two objects we would not be able to use to meet our needs. So how do we go about doing this? So for this, we use the binding context. Now this binding context, assume that this table has 100 rows. So each row in this table has a binding context, which is nothing but a pointer to the OData model. So in this case, let's say this entry 3, row 3. This binding context of row 3 has a pointer to the OData model, this entry 3 right here. So our goal is to get this binding context, and this is going to give us a pointer to the OData model. But more importantly, this binding context has a delete method. And this delete method is going to delete this row locally, and you can see that it doesn't trigger a post to the backend. So we can call the delete method on this binding context, and this is going to remove this from the OData model, or at least mark it as deleted, and it will also and then you can, once everything looks good, then you can submit the changes. Now one thing it doesn't do is when you call the delete method on this binding context, it's not going to remove it from the UI control. So you have to do some kind of styling to make sure that this entry looks like it is deleted. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. So if I go to my application itself, I'm already in branch 5. So I've already moved to branch 5. So let me go ahead and run this application. So, and the only thing in this application, if I go to this masterview.xml, I now have a new column. So along with the 3 columns that we had before, we have this new column called delete. And the value for that is just a button. You can see that it's just a button, and it is going to call the onDelete local. So if I go into my master controller.js, and if I look into this onDelete local, what I'm going to do is I'm trying to get the binding context for the row that was selected. So the way we do that is the OEvent argument. If I call the getSource method of the OEvent, this is going to get the object that triggered this event. In this case, this is the button that triggered it. So if I go to my application right here, if I go ahead and refresh this, so this button, if I click on this button and the OEvent.getSource is going to get access to this button right here. Now, once I get access to that button right here, if I call the parent of this button, so this button is part of this row right here. So when I call the get parent of this button, this is going to give me this row right here, and that's what we want. So at this moment, I have this row right here, whatever row that I clicked. Now I can get the binding context of that row. So this method right here is going to give me the binding context. So we are right here. So let's say we deleted row 3. We clicked on this button. We got the row, and then we get binding context, and we get this row, get the binding context. And now all we have to do is call the delete method. And I'm going to call the delete method right here. Now, when I call delete method, like I mentioned, it's not going to remove the row from the UI. So we have to do some visual stuff for that. So in our application right here, I'm going to go ahead and delete, and you will see that what I'm going to do is I'm going to have like a highlight here, and then there is also a tooltip that says row is deleted. This row is now disabled as well, and then even like with the color, I have the background, and you see that it is deleted all the way through, and it's even under like there is a strike through right here as well. So for that, I use some kind of a CSS right here. So in the CSS style CSS, I have some cell background and so on. You can have fancier ways of displaying that this row is deleted. So that's all I have to do. So I can go ahead and delete another row. So get the binding context, call the delete method on the binding context. And then once you're good to go, then you can call the submit changes. So when you hit submit changes, it's going to submit these 2 changes. And if I go into my network itself, let me remove this thing. If I hit submit changes, there's going to be a batch call, and there's 1 delete, and there's 2 deletes within this batch, and these 2 rows are now gone from the backend as well. So that's how we would do the delete. So delete a little bit more complex, I guess. Well, maybe not. All you have to do is make sure you get the binding context and call the delete method on the binding context. And it's not going to remove it from the UI. And actually, this is a good thing because you need to let the user know that this row is deleted. So some kind of styling. So this is actually a good thing that it doesn't remove it from the UI. So some styling is required to show that it is deleted. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is how you can do some reset changes. So for this, I will go to the next branch right here. So git checkout 6. Reset changes is fairly straightforward. So if I go into, let me run this application itself. So let's say you've made some changes to the application, and then you just want to discard all of the changes. So the OData model has a method called ResetChanges. So let's say you've made some lot of local changes to the OData model, and they have not yet been posted to the backend. All you can do is call ResetChanges, and this will discard all the local changes in the OData model. And that's exactly what we're going to do right here in this branch. So if I look in my masterview.xml, I now have a new button here called ResetChanges, and this calls the onReset method. And if I look into the onReset method itself, the only thing that I'm calling is the ResetChanges. Some arguments I'm passing, like I'm saying true. So even if it is local changes, just discard all of them. And then once it's discarded, then I also want to make sure that if the cells, like I want to disable the cells for editing. And then we can, if I go back to my application right here, let's go to the network. Let me go ahead and refresh this here. So the application will look like this. So if I say create, and let's say I put in some values, A, let me create another one. Let's say B, and B. And let's say this is not something that I want. Then I can simply click reset changes, and you can see in the batch there's nothing that is being posted to the backend because all this is being done local. And then once you hit reset changes, all the changes in the OData model is discarded. Now if I hit submit changes, nothing happens because there are no changes in the OData model. So even when I hit submit changes, you can see that nothing happens because there are no pending changes on the OData model. Okay, so in this session, we looked at how we can do delete and also reset changes. Thank you for watching.